Today I'm going to show you how to make these crackers from sourdough discard. The great thing I love about this recipe is that it is 2 ingredients, and it is a great use of all this bonus starter you get whenever you're refreshing. So we're going to just, our 2 ingredients are our starter and butter. So we are going to measure out 200 grams of starter here. Making sure that we're keeping enough starter in your jar to refresh with. So 200 grams is what I'm going for. Okay, 200, almost on the dot. Okay, and here I've got 50 grams of melted butter. And for this one, I'm gonna actually use my tools. So we're gonna slide that on in here. So this is just butter that has sort of been out on the counter for a minute. Okay, so that's it. We're gonna take this and mix. Just fold it on in. Super simple. I love this one because you don't have to add any extra flour. You are just working with the fermented flour in the starter, which is, great for people who can't really digest regular flour. For me, I have definitely found a difference in eating sourdough products versus, just standard yeasted flour. It doesn't give me that like bloated feeling whenever I'm working with fermented flour, and that's kind of why I focus more on making these wholesome like recipes that are good for your gut, that are low on the glycemic index. I kind of like naturally or accidentally grew up crunchy. With my parents being Lebanese, I always had like fresh fruits and vegetables all around and easily accessible, and I thought that was just normal. And it wasn't until I got to college and knew how to cook for myself that I realized that, wow, most people don't actually know. So I'm happy to be sharing some of this stuff. Okay, so you just want to mix it enough to where it's a nice goop and you don't see any more butter streaks. It's not separated anymore, it's just like one goop. So from here, it's super simple. We are just going to take an oven pan with, you can use parchment. I have this handy dandy Silpat, so I don't need anything more. The butter allows it to not stick as badly. So we're just going to pour it out here in one kind of like central location. Don't waste any of it. Okay, and having the water nearby is kind of helpful because it'll help you to spread this out a little bit more smoothly. So you're just gonna spread this out relatively thinly. You can do it like this where it's one big sheet, or you can kind of plop it in and make smaller crackers out of it. I prefer this simple way of just spreading it out and breaking it up. And what I love about this is like you can really make this recipe your own. With the simple base, it allows for a lot of personal customization. So whatever spices you want to use, whatever you have on hand. Some of my personal favorites are everything spice. I don't know anybody who doesn't love everything, like everything bagel spice. Okay, so this is about where we want it to go. And I also love, like, this is like so easy to work with. Okay, so I'm gonna try to stretch it to the edges here. I don't want anything too thick, but I also don't want it super thin to where it's gonna just melt in your hands. So after this, it's a great idea to add, some people use like salted butter instead of just regular unsalted butter. You can do that. You can just add this flaky salt on top, or just salt it with your regular table salt, whatever you have on hand. It's your choice. I happen to have a couple of options here. So I've got a local brand from a friend at the farmer's market. This is Timbo's Everything Spice. So I'm going to do that on half, and on the other half, I'm going to use some za'atar, which is a Lebanese spice blend of sesame seeds, sumac, and thyme with a little bit of salt in there. So we'll just do one half with the everything, and then the other half with the za'atar. So you just sprinkle it in like this. I love this one because it already has the salt built in, actually for both of these. So we'll just do half and half. I've got my oven here preheating at 350. All right, and that's it. So from here, we just pop it into the oven for a few minutes until it gets nice and flaky, and break it up into little pieces like this, and we're good to go. So we'll stick it in the oven right now. That's the nice thing, is you don't have to wait. You've already got your age starter here, so it's already done the work for you. That's gonna bake for about, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes. We'll check on it at 5 minutes. It's been about 7 minutes. I'm gonna pull out my crackers and see how they're doing. Ooh, I've got a little bubble with this, probably because we used a little fresh starter. It's still a little bit doughy, so I'm gonna keep it in the oven a little bit longer. Your end product doesn't have to be as brown as these guys. I baked these this morning and went to go get ready and forgot about them. So they're a little bit more brown than I normally go for, but what you're going for at the end is just this nice, crispy, just fall apart texture. Here they are. They're starting to look a little bit more crispy. I think because for this batch I used a recently refreshed starter. Usually I'm using the starter that I have in the fridge that's like a couple of days old, but since we used the recent batch, we are getting more of a, it's taking a little bit longer to bake, and we're getting this like puff in the fridge or in the oven. So I'm gonna just stick this back in for a little bit longer. I think we're still battling some of the doughiness. When I push here, it's like a little bit soft, like it feels like a little pillow. So we're gonna put it back, and I might actually even, I had this in the oven at 350, so I'm gonna just crank up the temp a bit, maybe to 400, and see if that helps us out a little bit. This is just like an example of like, it doesn't have to be a perfect science. Like you have to use some intuition and judgment and all your senses as you go with sourdough. And I think that's another reason that I love it so much, is that it's such a grounding practice. You really have to be in the moment. This sourdough cracker recipe is really, I've had the best success with it when using old sourdough starter. So sourdough starter that I've refreshed and I put in the fridge that's maybe a couple of days old. It's just sitting there waiting for its purpose. And with that type of starter that's kind of like lived its life, this recipe is better for that. I think I did burn it. Okay, so these crackers have been in the oven for about 20 minutes at 350, and I just turned the oven up to try to like speed it along. I may have burned them. I did kind of burn them. It was on a really high setting in the oven. It was like right under the burner. So I was surprised that it wasn't getting brown, but it did get brown. But I did burn some of the toppings. But just so you know, it's about 20 minutes that you want to go at 350. Don't turn it up and don't put it at the top of your oven. Thankfully, this recipe is so easy. I can easily make it again. I've got a whole bowl of sourdough discard in the fridge that I can literally just whip this up again. Okay, so 200 grams, what we're going for. I already pre-measured my 50 grams of butter. So you want this to be melted, but then kind of cooled. So you want this to be more like room temperature. So I'm just gonna pour that in. Okay, so we're just gonna mix this in again. Just spread it out to those edges. You really want to focus on getting this as even as you possibly can. Dipping this in water does help a bit to smooth it out, make it a little more pliable. And yeah, like I said, you can just make this your own, you know, whatever flavors good to you. You could probably even put like you could even make some like sweet crackers if that floats your boat. I'm gonna be real generous with this guy. Pop it in the oven. Again, I moved my oven rack down and put it at 350 instead of 400, and I'm gonna bake it for about 10 minutes. Check on it. It will probably go more like 20 minutes in the oven, but we'll see. So a couple of things that we changed. We put them in the center of the oven, and we removed the sill pat. So the sill pat is this, I don't know, cloth silicone mat that was underneath that I think was like holding a little bit too much moisture. When I make these, typically I have a piece of parchment on the bottom, so we were doing kind of another experiment unintentionally with the sill pat. There is enough butter, I think, in this recipe that you won't have to worry even about using a parchment. The parchment does make it a little bit easier in case you have a stickier mix so that it will come off. But see, it's already sliding around. It's golden and crispy, that's what we want. And when I look at the bottom, it's also nice and golden and crispy down there. And again, it's probably because this pan is getting hotter at the bottom versus the sill pat being in between. So we learned something today. Okay, so from here, all you're gonna do is crack it up. You should probably wait till it's a little cooler, so we'll wait a little bit. It's cooled down a bit. Now it's like more crispy all over, whereas when we just pulled it out, there was still some humidity, so it was a little bit more kind of sticking together. So now all we have to do is just crack it, and this is like really a satisfying feeling. I'm gonna take this little bite. Perfect, perfectly flaky, perfectly seasoned. You can kind of feel that that buttery, like it's like almost like a melt in your mouth experience. It's super good, super easy. I love this as a go-to sourdough discard recipe. It's also really easy to use a lot of sourdough discard. I mean, like this is all the crackers that it made, right? So you can see these going real quickly. So if you want to make a larger batch, again, just scale it 25% butter. Whatever your discard is, it's 25% butter to add to that, and whatever seasonings that you want to put on top. I think I made these the first time and they were gone within the evening, and it was just John and I. Sourdough discard crackers are easy and delicious way to use your sourdough discard.